The flagpole stood in the very center of the compound, where it was visible from every window of all 3 dormitories. The head of the East Dormitory, my building, was in charge of the flag. He was a tall, eagle-eyed man in his late 50s or early 60s. His bristly hair was flecked with gray, and his sunburned neck bore a long scar. People whispered that he was a graduate of the wartime Nakano spy school, but no one knew for sure. Next to him stood a student who acted as his assistant. No one really knew this guy, either. He had the world's shortest crew cut and always wore a navy blue student uniform. I didn't know his name or which room he lived in, never saw him in the dining hall or the bath. I'm not even sure he was a student, though you would think he must have been, given the uniform, which quickly became his nickname. In contrast to Sir Nakano, uniform was short, pudgy and pasty-faced. This creepy couple would raise the banner of the rising sun every morning at 6. When I first entered the dormitory, the sheer novelty of the event would often prompt me to get up early to observe this patriotic ritual. The two would appear in the quadrangle at almost the exact moment the radio beeped the 6 o'clock signal. Uniform was wearing his uniform, of course, with black leather shoes, and Nakano wore a short jacket and white trainers. Uniform held a ceremonial box of untreated paulownia wood, while Nakano carried a Sony tape recorder at his side. He placed this at the base of the flagpole, while Uniform opened the box to reveal a neatly folded banner. This he reverentially proffered to Nakano, who would clip it to the rope on the flagpole, revealing the bright red circle of the rising sun on a field of pure white. Then Uniform pressed the switch for the playing of the anthem. May our lords reign. And up the flag would climb. Until pebbles turned to boulders. It would reach halfway up the pole. And be covered with moss. Now it was at the top. The two stood to attention, rigid, looking up at the flag, which was quite a sight on clear days when the wind was blowing. The lowering of the flag at dusk was carried out with the same ceremonial reverence, but in reverse. Down the banner would come and find its place in the box. The national flag did not fly at night. I didn't know why the flag had to be taken down at night. The nation continued to exist while it was dark, and plenty of people worked all night, railway construction crews and taxi drivers and bar hostesses and firemen and night watchmen. It seemed unfair to me that such people were denied the protection of the flag. Or maybe it didn't matter all that much and nobody really cared, aside from me. Not that I really cared, either, it was just something that happened to cross my mind. The rules for room assignments put first and second year students in doubles while third and final year students had single rooms. Double rooms were a little longer and narrower than 9 by 12, with an aluminum framed window in the wall opposite the door and 2 desks by the window arranged so the inhabitants of the room could study back to back. To the left of the door stood a steel bunk bed. The furniture supplied was sturdy and simple and included a pair of lockers, a small coffee table, and some built-in shelves. Even the most well-disposed observer would have had trouble calling this setting poetic. The shelves of most rooms carried such items as transistor radios, hair dryers, electric carafes and cookers, instant coffee, tea bags, sugar cubes, and simple pots and bowls for preparing instant ramen. The walls bore pin-ups from girly magazines or stolen porno movie posters. One guy had a photo of pigs mating, but this was a far-out exception to the usual naked women, girl pop singers or actresses. Bookshelves on the desks held textbooks, dictionaries and novels. The filth of these all-male rooms was horrifying. Moldy mandarin skins clung to the bottoms of wastepaper baskets. Empty cans used for ashtrays held mounds of cigarette butts, and when these started to smolder, they'd be doused with coffee or beer and left to give off a sour stink. Blackish grime and bits of indefinable matter clung to all the bowls and dishes on the shelves, and the floors were littered with instant ramen wrappers and empty beer cans and discarded lids from one thing or another. It never occurred to anyone to sweep up and throw these things in the bin. Any wind that blew through would raise clouds of dust. Each room had its own horrendous smell, but the components of that smell were always the same: sweat, body odor and rubbish. Dirty clothes would pile up under the beds, and without anyone bothering to air the mattresses on a regular basis, these sweat-impregnated pads would give off odors beyond redemption. In retrospect, it seems amazing that these shit piles gave rise to no killer epidemics. My room, on the other hand, was as sanitary as a morgue. The floor and window were spotless, the mattresses were aired each week, all pencils stood in the pencil holders, and even the curtains were washed once a month. My roommate was a cleanliness freak. None of the others in the dorm believed me when I told them about the curtains. They didn't know that curtains could be washed. They believed, rather, that curtains were semi-permanent parts of the window. There's something wrong with that guy, they'd say, labeling him a Nazi or a stormtrooper. We didn't even have pin-ups. No, We had a photo of a canal in Amsterdam. I had put up a nude shot, but my roommate had pulled it down. "Hey, Watanabe," he said, "I'm not too crazy about this kind of thing," and up went the canal photo instead. I wasn't especially attached to the nude, so I didn't protest. "What the hell's that?" was the universal reaction to the Amsterdam photo whenever any of the other guys came to my room. "Oh, Stormtrooper likes to wank looking at this," I said. I meant it as a joke, but they all took me seriously, so seriously that I began to believe it myself. Everybody sympathized with me for having Stormtrooper as a roommate, but I really wasn't that upset about it. He left me alone as long as I kept my area clean, and in fact having him as my roommate made things easier for me in many ways. He did all the cleaning, he took care of sunning the mattresses, he threw out the rubbish. He'd give a sniff and suggest a bath for me if I'd been too busy to wash for a few days. He'd even point out when it was time for me to go to the barber's or trim my nasal hair. The one thing that bothered me was the way he would spray clouds of insecticide if he noticed a single fly in the room, because then I had to take refuge in a neighboring shit pile. Stormtrooper was studying geography at a national university. As he told me the first time we met, "I'm studying maps." "You like maps?" I asked. "Yup. When I graduate, I'm going to work for the Geographical Survey Institute and make maps." I was impressed by the variety of dreams and goals that life could offer. This was one of the very first new impressions I received when I came to Tokyo for the first time. The thought struck me that society needed a few people, just a few, who were interested in and even passionate about mapmaking. Odd, though, that someone who wanted to work for the government's Geographical Survey Institute should stutter every time he said the word map. Stormtrooper often didn't stutter at all, except when he pronounced the word map, for which it was a 100% certainty. What are you studying?" he asked me. "Drama," I said. "Gonna put on plays?" "Nah, just read scripts and do research. Racine, Ionesco, Shakespeare, stuff like that." He said he had heard of Shakespeare but not the others. I hardly knew anything about the others myself, I'd just seen their names in lecture handouts. "You like plays?" he asked. "Not especially." This confused him, and when he was confused, his stuttering got worse. I felt sorry I had done that to him. "I could have picked anything," I said. "Ethnology, Asian history. I just happened to pick drama, that's all," which was not the most convincing explanation I could have come up with. "I don't get it," he said, looking as if he really didn't get it. "I like maps, so I decided to come to Tokyo and get my parents to send me money so I could study maps. But not you, huh?" His approach made more sense than mine. I gave up trying to explain myself. Then we drew lots, matchsticks, to choose bunks. He got the upper bunk. Tall, with a crew cut and high cheekbones, he always wore the same outfit: white shirt, black trousers, black shoes, navy blue jumper. To these he would add a uniform jacket and black briefcase when he went to his university, a typical right-wing student. Which is why everybody called him Stormtrooper. But in fact he was totally indifferent to politics. He wore a uniform because he didn't want to be bothered choosing clothes. What interested him were things like changes in the coastline or the completion of a new railway tunnel. Nothing else. He'd go on for hours once he got started on a subject like that, until you either ran away or fell asleep. He was up at 6 each morning with the strains of May Our Lord's Reign. Which is to say that ostentatious flag-raising ritual was not entirely useless. He'd get dressed, go to the bathroom and wash his face, forever. I sometimes got the feeling he must be taking out each tooth and washing it, one at a time. Back in the room, he would snap the wrinkles out of his towel and lay it on the radiator to dry, then return his toothbrush and soap to the shelf. Finally he'd do radio calisthenics with the rest of the nation. End speech. I was used to reading late at night and sleeping until 8 o'clock, so even when he started shuffling around the room and exercising, I remained unconscious, until the part where he started jumping. He took his jumping seriously and made the bed bounce every time he hit the floor. I stood it for 3 days because they had told us that communal life called for a certain degree of resignation, but by the morning of the 4th day, I couldn't take it anymore. "Hey, can you do that on the roof or somewhere?" I said. "I can't sleep." "But it's already 6:30 a.m. he said, open-mouthed. "Yeah, I know it's 6:30 a.m. I'm still supposed to be asleep. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but that's how it works for me. Anyway, I can't do it on the roof. Somebody on the 3rd floor would complain. Here, we're over a storeroom. So go out on the quad. On the lawn. That's no good, either. I don't have a transistor radio. I need to plug it in. And you can't do radio calisthenics without music. True, his radio was an old piece of junk without batteries. Mine was a transistor portable, but it was strictly FM, for music. Okay, let's compromise, I said. Do your exercises but cut out the jumping part. It's so damn noisy. What do you say? Jew jumping? What's that? Jumping is jumping. Bouncing up and down. But there isn't any jumping. My head was starting to hurt. I was ready to give up, but I wanted to make my point. I got out of bed and started bouncing up and down and singing the opening melody of NHK's Radio Calisthenics. I'm talking about this. I said. Oh, that. I guess you're right. I never noticed. See what I mean? I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Just cut out that part. I can put up with the rest. Stop jumping and let me sleep. But that's impossible, he said matter-of-factly. I can't leave anything out. I've been doing the same thing every day for 10 years, and once I start, I do the whole routine unconsciously. If I left something out, I wouldn't be able to do any of it. There was nothing more for me to say. What could I have said? The quickest way to put a stop to this was to wait for him to leave the room and throw his goddamn radio out the goddamn window, but I knew if I did that all hell would break loose. Stormtrooper treasured everything he owned. He smiled when he saw me sitting on the bed at a loss for words and tried to comfort me. Hey, Watanabe, why don't you just get up and exercise with me? And he went off to breakfast. Naoko chuckled when I told her the story of Stormtrooper and his radio calisthenics. I hadn't been trying to amuse her, but I ended up laughing myself. Though her smile vanished in an instant, I enjoyed seeing it for the first time in a long while. We had left the train at Yotsuya and were walking along the embankment by the station. It was a Sunday afternoon in the middle of May. The brief on and off showers of the morning had cleared up before noon, and a south wind had swept away the low-hanging clouds. The brilliant green leaves of the cherry trees stirred in the air, splashing sunlight in all directions. This was an early summer day. The people we passed carried their jumpers or jackets over their shoulders or in their arms. Everyone looked happy in the warm Sunday afternoon sun. The young men playing tennis in the courts beyond the embankment had stripped down to their shorts. Only where two nuns in winter habits sat talking on a bench did the summer light seem not to reach, though both wore looks of satisfaction as they enjoyed chatting in the sun. 15 minutes of walking and I was sweaty enough to take off my thick cotton shirt and go with a t-shirt. Naoko had rolled the sleeves of her light gray sweatshirt up to her elbows. It was nicely faded, obviously having been washed many times. I felt as if I had seen her in that shirt long before. This was just a feeling I had, not a clear memory. I didn't have that much to remember about Naoko at the time. How do you like communal living? She asked. Is it fun to live with a lot of other people? I don't know, I've only been doing it a month or so. It's not that bad, I can stand it. She stopped at a fountain and took a sip, wiping her mouth with a white handkerchief she took from her trouser pocket. Then she bent over and carefully retied her laces. Do you think I could do it? What? Living in a dorm? Aha. I suppose it's all a matter of attitude. You could let a lot of things bother you if you wanted to, the rules, the idiots who think they're hot shit, the roommates doing radio calisthenics at 6:30 in the morning. But it's pretty much the same anywhere you go, you can manage. I guess so, she said with a nod. She seemed to be turning something over in her mind. Then she looked straight into my eyes as if peering at some unusual object. Now I saw that her eyes were so deep and clear they made my heart thump. I realized that I had never had occasion to look into her eyes like this. It was the first time the two of us had ever gone walking together or talked at such length. Are you thinking about living in a dorm or something? I asked. She said. I was just wondering what communal life would be like. And she seemed to be trying, and failing, to find exactly the right word or expression. Then she sighed and looked down. Oh, I don't know. Never mind. That was the end of the conversation. She continued walking east, and I followed just behind. Almost a year had gone by since I had last seen Naoko, and in that time, she had lost so much weight as to look like a different person. The plump cheeks that had been a special feature of hers were all but gone, and her neck had become delicate and slender. Not that she was bony now or unhealthy looking, there was something natural and serene about the way she had slimmed down, as if she had been hiding in some long, narrow space until she herself had become long and narrow. And a lot prettier than I remembered. I wanted to tell her that, but couldn't find a good way to put it. We had not planned to meet but had run into each other on the Chuo commuter line. She had decided to see a film by herself, and I was headed for the bookshops in Kanda, nothing urgent in either case. She had suggested that we leave the train, which we happened to do in Yotsuya, where the green embankment makes for a nice place to walk by the old castle moat. Alone together, we had nothing in particular to talk about, and I wasn't quite sure why Naoko had suggested we get off the train. We had never really had much to say to each other. Naoko started walking the minute we hit the street, and I hurried after her, keeping a few paces behind. I could have closed the distance between us, but something held me back. I walked with my eyes on her shoulders and her straight black hair. She wore a big brown hair slide, and when she turned her head, I caught a glimpse of a small, white ear. Now and then she would look back and say something. Sometimes it would be a remark I might have responded to, and sometimes it would be something to which I had no idea how to reply. Other times, I simply couldn't hear what she was saying. She didn't seem to care one way or another. Once she had finished saying whatever she wanted to say, she'd face front again and keep on walking. Oh, well, I told myself, it was a nice day for a stroll. This was no mere stroll for Naoko, though, judging from that walk. She turned right at Litabashi, came out at the moat, crossed the intersection at Jinbocho, climbed the hill at Okanamazu, and came out at Ongo. From there she followed the tram tracks to Komagome. It was a challenging route. By the time we reached Komagome, the sun was sinking, and the day had become a soft spring evening. "Where are we?" asked Naoko, as if noticing our surroundings for the first time. "Komagome," I said. "Didn't you know? We made this big arc." "Why did we come here?" "You brought us here. I was just following you." We went to a shop by the station for a bowl of noodles. Thirsty, I had a whole beer to myself. Neither of us said a word from the time we gave our order to the time we finished eating. I was exhausted from all that walking, and she just sat there with her hands on the table, mulling something over again. All the leisure spots were crowded on this warm Sunday, they were saying on the TV news. And we just walked from Yotsuya to Komagome, I said to myself. "Well, you're in good shape," I said when I had finished my noodles. "Surprised?" "Yeah. I was a long-distance runner at school, I'll have you know. I used to do the 10,000 meters. And my father took me mountain climbing on Sundays ever since I can remember. You know our house, right there, next to the mountain. I've always had strong legs.